What are your unforgettably creepy moments? Please like and subscribe to support us. When I was like 12 or 13, me and my brother used to ride our bikes for hours in the afternoon after homework. It was a dreamy life, small town, in Mexico, long afternoons and lots of places we could explore. A creek near home, some hills, caves, other small towns a mile or two away. Good times. One day, my mom comes kind of sad from work. She used to work as a secretary at the local high school. Her best friend, another secretary at school, had a father with Alzheimer's and had just gone missing the previous night, probably went outside and wandered into the nearby woods and forgot the way back home. Days passed, and my mom's friend had to leave work for some days to look for her father. Her mother had passed away years ago, and she lived only with her father, and organized some searches on the woods with people from the town. A couple of weeks passed, no signs of the guy. Then one afternoon, me and my brother were riding our bike on some fields near the creek, and we stopped to drink some water from our bottles. We stayed there for a few minutes, discussing if we should get back or not, as it was getting darker. Then, the smell. It hit suddenly when the wind changed direction. We thought it was a dead raccoon or something, so we set out to look for it. Don't ask me why. And there it was, in the middle of a puddle, a big fat decomposing body with his pants down, maggots coming out of his belly button. I still, to this day, wonder why didn't we throw up at the combined sight and smell. We obviously got the hell out of there, pedaling as fast as we could. We did not tell anyone that night. The next day, we realized we had to do something about it. We should tell Mom, the police. Somebody. We didn't. We went back, as if for some reason, we needed confirmation that there was a dead guy on the fields. Well, confirmed it was. We stayed there for 10 minutes or so, discussing what should we do. What we ended up doing was not the most logical thing. Hell, I still don't know why the hell did we do that. We gathered some stones and positioned on the very close dirt road as an arrow to point to the dead guy, and left. I don't know who found it next, but the next day my mom came back from work crying. They found it. They found my friend's dad. Dead. They say somebody killed him and left an arrow pointing at the body. Holy shit. I was cold, I started shivering, crying, and wanted to tell all about it. But my mom hugged me. I know, sweetheart. I know how you feel. He was a good guy. Poor Mom's friend name. She must be hurting so much. I didn't know what to say. My brother was not there. If he were, he probably would have said something. As soon as I saw him, he was playing Nintendo in his room, obviously. I made him promise over Mom and Dad's life that we, as long as we lived, would not say anything to anyone. I don't know what was the police's final conclusion on the case, but the supposed killing was the talk of the town for months to come. I felt like shit every time I overheard any conversation on the guy. This is the first time I have ever talked or written about it. This is my childhood creepy moment. I used to work as a biohazard remediator. I cleaned up after the coroner took all of the body that he could / cared to take. There are probably a dozen or so stories I could tell, but the first that comes to mind is the time a 40-something single woman died of an apparent heart attack. They didn't find her for a week or so, but she wasn't alone when she died. She lived with 3 dogs. After a while, the dogs got hungry and ate her. Not all of her, but they drug her all over the house in the process. When I got there, it looked like a slasher movie. There was blood all over the floor and halfway up the walls. There was so much in some places that it seeped under the walls and into the trough that the walls were set into. I still get that sick feeling in my stomach when I think about that. I have lived in Juarez City for all my life, so I lived through what was probably the most hardest and harshest stage of Felipe Calderon's war on crime. For the time being, I have witnessed 2 carjacks. On one, a man got shot in the jaw for resisting. I have been inside of a store during a robbery and I've had a gun put against my head. That was really scary. I saw a guy get executed with what seemed hundreds of bullets fired from machine guns in the middle of a crowded street in the middle of the day. And, well, besides getting mugged twice, and the occasional bar fight that gets out of hand, I have seen a lot, and unfortunately, I think pretty much anyone who's lived in Juarez has too. A few years ago, I moved away to college, and I got into some pretty hard drugs, flunked school, and became addicted to one in particular. After many long nights and terrible decisions made in order to obtain the drug, and watching others make even worse decisions, I saw my dealer odd and, scared sober, I moved back home and quickly joined my local NA chapter. This is where things get creepy. After a couple of weeks in the program, I made some sober friends who understood what I had gone through. After a few more weeks, I started to get kind of a weird vibe from one guy a few years older than me, but kind of brushed it off, thinking he just had a crush, and my synapses were still damaged from drug abuse. Until one night after a meeting, I stopped at a gas station on the way home, Not needing gas, just had an urge to stop there. As I was perusing the store, I noticed the guy who had a crush on me in the gas station. I knew he didn't have a vehicle, and this location was too far from the meeting for him to have walked that quickly. I looked around, and nobody else from the meeting was there. I approached him and asked how he got there, and he, seemingly very flustered, said, "Aw shit, I rode with, name withheld, they must have left me here." Thinking this was strange, I offered him a ride in my pickup truck back to his sponsor's place. He accepted. He declined my offer to call the friend who had maybe forgotten him and tell them he had a ride. I had the strangest feeling and just couldn't wait to get him out of my truck. The following morning I looked in the bed of my truck and found a Zippo lighter with a very ornate engraving. The very next meeting I attended, I stayed on the porch to smoke afterward with the creepy guy, and set the Zippo on a table as he sat across from me, at which point he snatched it up and said, "Hey, how'd you get this?" And I calmly said I must have borrowed it and forgotten to give it back, and quietly said my last goodbyes to everyone I cared for at that chapter of Narconon. Fast forward 2 months, ex-sponsor calls me and tells me to check my email in a very horrified voice. The headline states, "Brutal murder claims life. Murderer Thomas Kakashi is glad he did it. The woman he brutally strangled to death, post-mortem raped, whose body he placed in the bathtub of her own home, then poured bleach, Windex, and whatever he could find on and inside her, was an ex-girlfriend he, on numerous occasions, had told me I looked exactly like." As I stared at her photo on the glaring screen of my laptop, noticing her bleached hair, small frame, light complexion and light eyes, I saw how lucky I was to be alive. Coming back from spring break in Key West, Florida, the group I was traveling with had to stop in North Miami at 2 a.m. for gas. Keep in mind that we are all blazed out of our skulls for the story. We got off the interstate and stopped at some sketchy gas station. Some of the guys went in, the others went to the bathroom on the side of the building. While inside, I got this really weird, uncomfortable feeling. Everyone in the store was making eye contact, but not saying anything. Not a single word. You could hear a pin drop. I gave my friend ahead of me in line some money to pay for my food. I had to get out of that store, too many creepy vibes. The second I walk out the door, a lady starts screaming bloody murder. A huge black guy with no shirt on was beating her through her car window. He was punching her right in the face, as hard as Mike Tyson. She eventually got her car in drive, and started to take off. The crazy guy hung on and was drugged down the street for about 50 yards. He eventually pulled the door off its hinges, and the lady drove off. So we are all standing there, watching this huge crazy guy walk back towards the gas station, covered in blood, carrying a car door on his shoulder. We all jumped in the truck and took off. About a mile down the road, 15 cop cars flew past us. No one said a word in the truck for the next hour or so. We were all trying to wrap our heads around what we had just seen. When I was less than 10, my police officer father had picked me up from school and was dropping me off at my grandparents' while he was on duty. There was a call to a park near where we were. Every time we've talked about this, he says he knew he shouldn't have taken me but also knew he didn't have a choice. We pull up to this park in his squad car next to another couple of cops with their guns drawn pointed towards a man sitting on a park bench under a tree facing away from us. My dad gets out and tells me to stay in the car. From my angle, I had no idea why they here for this guy. A negotiator showed up and tried talking to this guy for a few minutes but to no prevail. He pulled the trigger on the double-barrel shotgun he had between his legs, blew his head completely off. I didn't scream, didn't cry, just kinda stared shocked. The part that sticks in my mind was what fell from the tree, the brains and blood that my dad took the rest of the day off, took me to my favorite place to eat and talked to me about what all his job entailed. So I was one of the first class at UC Merced. Basically, they built a brand new campus in the middle of nowhere, so the only roads to the school were two-lane roads. The kinds of roads that are straight and flat for miles but have no street lights. Me and some friends were driving back to campus late one night after getting some fast food and saw another car, probably about 2 miles away, coming towards us with their lights on. When the car saw our lights, they naturally turned their lights back to normal. I wish they never did this. Our two cars are getting closer and closer together. As the car coming towards us is about 10 feet away, both cars are traveling approx 50 miles per hour, mind you. I see the shadow of a figure directly in front of their car, and in a split second, we hear this thickening crunch. It happens so fast that you are just in shock. I pull over, and we find out the other car full of college kids has just hit some guy who was walking down a pitch black highway at 50 miles per hour. I was at work just over 3 years ago. While it was a slow day, we still have a few minor things we can do to stay busy on our slower days, and this was most certainly slow until now. I was walking around our parking lot to make sure nothing was suspicious, I work at an airport. It's really not uncommon for people to park like assholes and leave their car for an extended period of time. While walking about the parking lot, I noticed a PT Cruiser kind of parked funny and all a mess, and when I looked inside through the window, I saw what appeared to be a hair under a blanket. I initially thought it to be a dog but found out it was an older woman who had committed suicide. She had been there for 4 months, and only her hair, nails and some skin remained intact. The proper authorities were contacted, but BC of the company I work for, I was chosen to remain on scene and watch her being pulled out scoop by scoop and spew onto the ground. Not me, but my dad was a first responder when he was in his 20s for a while, and this incident made him quit. He was called to the scene of a motorcycle accident. The guy on the motorcycle was following a large truck, so he couldn't see around it and went to pass him and instantly hit an oncoming car. The guy went flying over the car, and for lack of a better word, was splattered all over the road. Declared dead on the scene. The worst part was that the woman who hit him, it wasn't her fault at all, had 2 toddlers in the back. They were all fine, thankfully, but their car was totaled. When the woman's husband arrived, he started screaming at her about totaling the car and how expensive it's going to be to get a new one, insurance, all that stuff. The asshole never asked if his wife or kids were all right. Infuriated my dad, and after seeing the motorcycle guy's body and this jerk yelling at his wife, my dad quit the next day. This might be the caliber of the other stories here, but this freaked me out when I first saw it. So like 4 years ago, when I was in high school, I used to exercise in the basement of my house, which is connected to the garage because my house is built into the side of a hill. Anyway, I'm exercising when I hear this loud clicking noise coming from the garage. I had no idea what it was like 10 p.m., and everyone else was either asleep or in their bedroom on the other side of the house. I opened the door to the garage, and I can't even comprehend what I was looking at. A bat had gotten its wing stuck to some fly tape, and the clicking was its teeth against its bone. It was trying to bite off its arm. The clicking was so loud. My father died, September of 2011. He was hooking a boat trailer to his truck when he just dropped. He fell on a cement slab and skinned the side of his face. They said he was dead before he hit the ground. It was a good 2 hours before anyone found him, and by that time, the fire ants had gotten to him and had chewed the side of his face up pretty good. They were in his eyes, coming out of his nose, mouth and ears. It was almost a sensory overload, seeing your recently deceased father being consumed by insects. When I was 13, me and my friends were hanging around town like usual. We went to the park first in the morning. We saw a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was wearing a hood, and he had a long beard. He had a can of beer and got up and started walking towards us, so we ran. Later on, we were taking a shortcut through the library's car park to go to McDonald's, and we saw the same guy standing by some bushes staring directly at us. 2 of my friends, girls, started dancing for some reason. They hadn't seen him, it was only me that saw him. I told my best friend Walter, and we tried to get everyone else to hurry up. Walter turned around to check everyone and saw the guy in the bushes now. His flies were undone, and his dick was hanging out. We ran as fast as we could. We didn't see him any more times after that.
Please like and subscribe to support us.